We were banned from a local library, you and I, for just reading the pornographic books in the children's section of the library, which you pointed out to me are in the middle school libraries, and I looked them up.
Trump brings to it is a clear understanding of a clear vision of what we want for America and for the American people. And one of the things he looks at is he wants them to have life, which is why he's gone after all these wars all over the world. One of the first things he wants to stop the killing, because you can't have a good life if you're dead.
No.
Stop the killing.
This is number 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' unions. Put the party line in textbooks. You think we've done any of that?
In many of the schools, teachers are undermining the relationship between the parent and the child, and they're helping children get abortions. They're helping children transition from male to female, which you can't do anyway, but they're helping them go through this fake process.
I'm back with my good friend, investigative reporter, undercover police officer, retired now to a certain extent, but retired from public works and has his own practice. Tom, are you still looking out at the world and are you finding any good in it?
Well, there's a lot of good, just
Yes.
it's hidden quite a bit.
I was reading Ephesians 6 again, and it's amazing to me as I'm reading that. I can't get away from this. And because I keep looking out at the world and seeing all the evil. And St. Paul, Ephesians 6, put on the armor of God, be strong in his might, so be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, for we're not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present age. And he goes on how to do that. You know, I didn't realize when he's talking about the principalities, the powers, the rulers of this present age, these are the ranks of angels in right out of the Bible. So they have these different ranks of angels. Well, those are actually ranks of angels that are ruling the world because of mankind and turning to sin, right? And why do I bring that up? Because I keep looking out in the world and I'm trying to rationalize, Tom, what is going on here, even to what's happening to our children in this culture, and thinking, why aren't we all standing up and protecting children from really the destructive nature of even our public school systems and what we're seeing in this state of Illinois now. And I know I'm throwing a lot out on the table here, but with these new mental health initiatives coming right into our schools, I mean, what are we doing with this? It's if you take this battle between good and evil out, it makes no sense to me at all.
No, and right now, currently in the political system in most parts of the country, it's the bad guys that are winning. Fortunately, we have nationally, things are starting to look pretty good, but state by state, it's still a huge struggle, especially here in Illinois.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about Trump because I know that you have a certain view on Trump is very unique, and I see the same thing. But let me just start out with this, Tom, because this gets down to our granular level. We're doing another presentation on what we call stolen innocence, what's going on to the kids. And I just want to ask our audience, right, what's wrong with this picture? It costs almost $20,000 per student across the state if you average in Chicago, in the state of Illinois, for each student in the public school systems. And they don't teach the majority of those kids to do math or read at state proficiency levels, which, as we can bring up, have been dumbed down once again.
Right.
Because this right? It just recently
they changed it.
So children, Tom, should be able to trip over the proficiency standard. I mean, basically trip over them, and they're still not doing it. So what are we doing to our kids? Why are we putting up with this? We were banned from a local library, you and I, for just reading the pornographic books in the children's section of the library, which you pointed out to me are in the middle school libraries, and I looked them up. They're in my grandkids' libraries in their schools. And I'm thinking, okay, why again? So I just want to read a couple of these tenets. So this is from the 45 Goals of Communism. These were put into the Congressional Records, taken out of a book that you'll remember by Congressman Albert S. Herlong Jr. And so here's number 17. So 45 goals taken out of the Communist Manifesto. How do we practically implement this? Get control of the schools. This is number 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' unions. Put the party line in textbooks. You think we've done any of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, what we're seeing today is a fulfillment of what Nikita Khrushchev said, either in the late 50s or early 60s. And he said, we will bury you. And he wasn't talking about burying us with nuclear, destruction. He was talking about burying us in being ideologically overrun in the West. This is exactly what's happening.
Here is number 24 that you know well. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Eliminate all laws. You want to talk just briefly for our audience again about these the obscenity exemptions that they
Right,
put in
there's
place for our schools?
teachers and librarians in 40 states are exempt from any obscenity laws that have been imposed by the state. So in other words, they can't be charged with obscenity. And here's the problem, that a lot of us look at obscene material as things that are visual, videos, pictures, things like that. But what the real problem is in the narrative obscenity, and these are becoming wildly popular, especially among women. And I think it's one of the leading causes of women becoming more predatory in our culture. You hear it over and over again, female teachers being arrested and charged with sexual abuse of their students. When I was a kid, this kind of thing was completely unheard of. And so the obscenity that has infiltrated our culture has not only exacerbated the problem of men becoming more predatory, but also women becoming more predatory.
Well, that's a great point. And here is number 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. These people are so unimaginative, Tom. The Pritzkers of the world, the Kamala Harrises, and the Bill Gates. I mean, you could go off the whole World Economic Forum. They're so unimaginative. They basically are just spewing the same propaganda over and over again. I think evil, look at it, Marxism is a simple way of just saying atheistic, take all morality out. And you can just see this. I guess that's what evil is at the end, isn't it? It's just turning your back on everything that's true, good, and beautiful.
Well, it's being presented as though it's freedom of the press, because that's really the obscenity of the whole thing, is that they're claiming that these obscene materials are promoting obscene materials, allowing them to be in the libraries, allowing them to be in schools, is an example of how respectful we are of the principles of our Constitution, the very first principle being freedom of the press. This is a twisting of what the intent of those principles were. And so really, people need to think more deeply about what the implications are of what's happening in our schools, instead of just taking the knee-jerk reaction, says, well, these experts in the American Library Association say this is a threat to free speech. This is a threat to our freedoms in this country. Well, the American Library Association believes that if there's anything that's available for an adult to see, a child should be able to see it too. Now stop and think what that means.
Well, it gets back to this total breakdown. They don't care. You can't rationalize this. Here's to your other point. You're making these ahead of me, but here's number 29. When you get back to the American Constitution, right, and denigrating it, discredit the American Constitution. This is one of the 45. discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, and a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Number 30, discredit the American founding fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. And then finally, 31, belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part of the big picture, and give more emphasis to Marxist history.
Well, yeah, well, look what they did with the 1619 project, which was wildly popular as being, it's actually part of the standard curriculum in Chicago, the 1619 project, where they say that the country was really founded for the propagation and the perpetuation of slavery. This is just insane.
A complete lie. It's amazing fabrication, and people fall for this. And at the end of the day, look at this, number 32, support any social movement that gives centralized control over any part of the culture. Education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics. Mental health clinics. So when you start to see this, and I'll read 39 before we talk about what Pritzker's doing in our schools here, dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of governing coercive control over those who oppose these Marxist laws and goals.
Well, and we've seen this from the development of removing homosexuality from the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Now, and then changing the definition of gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, to, all these things that used to be considered abnormal to being, no, this is just part of the normal range of behavior, that people are born homosexual, they are born transgender, they are born in these ways, they are born with foot fetishes, I guess. They're born with all these different kinds of aberrant sexual interests, when in fact they're distortions of what God's plan is for humanity.
And here's what we find in these books. So to your point, we have a book that what got us banned from this library that we were reading out of, called Perfectly Normal, right? Everything's perfectly normal. It's for 10-year-olds. For 10-year-olds. So fifth graders. So my fifth grader. Here's our point always when we talk, and as people listen to us. This is not being up to you don't have to go out to your neighbor and to people that you know that are involved in, say, homosexual lifestyles, etc. What you and I are talking about here is teaching our children that everything is perfectly normal, disregarding what their parents are teaching them. This is the point. If you want to teach your kids something, c'est la vie, right? We hate to see it, but it is what it is. But the point is, in public schools, the point is that if parents are teaching one thing, the school has no business sexualizing and telling our children that things are perfectly normal. And here's my last point, number 26. And you made this already, Tom. You're ahead of me one step here. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. It's number 26.
Well, and what we got banned from the library for basically reading from this book, DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Hold that up again, Tom. Hold that up again.
DSM-5, okay?
Okay. All
and that book is in that library, and basically what I did was say that transgenders are suffering from gender dysphoria, which is a mental disorder. And that was considered to be hate speech.
Hate speech.
And this is what that book says.
It's in the book.
It's in that library. Right.
So again, to make this point, so we're talking. You were reading out of a book that's in their library, and that was considered hate speech. But yet, if we show pornography that's in their library and read that out loud, that's love speech somehow.
That's right.
This is the craziness. So now these mental health clinics are being put into our schools, Tom. What's going to happen with those?
Well, it's a serious problem. Think of less than half of the kids in this state.
Look at you and I have to smile because of
able to read
absurdity.
Or do math at grade level, and yet they think they're going to help these kids with with mental health. This is insane. I remember that in our presentation, there's that one psychologist who says that these people are so unwell he wouldn't trust them to water their plants.
His plants, right? You know, here's the thing. So when we talk to high school kids ourselves, we do high school retreats. What they want to talk about mental illness now, anxiety, depression, even why their peers are talking about suicide. So here's what happens. The government itself is promoting all these things that we just talked about. And then they're coming in and saying, "Oh, now we have the solution. We
Yeah,
have the
right.
solution." To your point. So here's number. So now we saw this with the Biden administration especially, and this is where Trump really comes in. When parents were standing up and saying, "No, this is insanity. I'm paying $20,000 for each child. This is what we're paying." You're not teaching them anything. You're lying to them.
Right.
You're twisting and distorting their moral imaginations so that we no longer look at a little boy doesn't no longer looks at a girl as you know with this awe and wonder of this young girl that he sees, but to see her as an object to use. I mean, this is exactly what we're doing, right? And then when the parents stood up against that and it said, "Look, you're not teaching our kid to read or do math. What are you doing?" Right? And why are these costs going so far up? Well, here's number 40, Tom. Discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. This was part of exactly what they did in Marxism. You know, this was
Right. Yeah.
Engels and Karl Marx actually said we should make it so easy to get divorced that in Russia at that time, that you could basically fill out a slip and send it into the government and you were divorced. That's how easy it
Yeah.
was to get divorced. There were people divorced 8, 9, 10 times walking in Moscow. They said at that time, and you could ask them, they would just flip husbands and wives like crazy. But here's what happens, you know, we have children involved. And this is what you and I always talk about. Who's protecting the children in all this?
Well, and I think, there's been so much focus in recent years about the rights of the child. Children have a right to this, right to that. They have a right to medical care. In Illinois, they have a right to get an abortion if they want one without anybody's oversight. Well, what I think is children have a right to have parents that look out for them. I think that's basically that is the basic right. They're not equipped to be able to deal with the society without somebody looking out for them, and they have a right to that. They have a right to have parents that can do that. And the government is interfering in every way in that right by eroding what the parents can and can't do with their children.
Here's number 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppression and influence of parents.
Well, and
It's
we even see that we see that in the schools. They're teaching that to the kids. They will tell the children that they're their real friend and that they can talk to them. They don't have to worry about. They won't tell their parents what they tell them. And so basically, in many of the schools, teachers are undermining the relationship between the parent and the child, and they're helping children get abortions. They're helping children transition from male to female, which you can't do anyway, but they're helping them go through this fake process and further damaging the child's mental health by undercutting that relationship, that most important relationship they have with their parents. And now they realize that they've screwed them all up. So now they want to have a mental health clinic in every in every school so that they can fix the kid after they've screwed them up.
and the reality is they have no intention of fixing the kid. That this is just another way to drive a wedge in, because now if I can identify the child who are bringing these prejudices from their parents and their religion and any way else into the school system, they lack empathy, they lack compassion, they're not seeing all these, right? And so now we can drive a wedge in between them even further. And so this is what you're seeing. So we're not fixing anything. These mental health clinics are just another way to drive a wedge and have power over parents, because now we can say, nope, these kids are really goofed up. parents, you really need to take a back seat to what we're doing here. And if not, we'll take the kids away from you.
Well, fortunately, this new ruling by the Supreme Court in Mahmoud versus Taylor gives parents almost total control over what happens to their children in the schools.
So let's talk about that again. Break that open for people that are listening, because we need to help them, be empowered, not to fear. The most used phrase in the Bible is "be not afraid." Be not
Right.
afraid. We have to stand up. We have to know that this is a battle between good and evil, and we have to finally look at our child and say they're trying to steal not only their innocence but their very soul, and to ruin these children. And it would make no rational sense, Tom. That's why I started with Ephesians 6. If you don't see that there's the power of evil when a man like a Pritzker or anybody else will come up alongside and cooperate with evil to actually destroy the very body and soul of a child. And to your point, you can be is it 13 years old that you can have an
Yeah,
abortion in this
I
state?
actually think it's even 12. It depends. Once they're
Without your parents, I mean,
right,
without your
if
parents
they're
knowing.
pregnant, I think they can get an abortion without the parents even knowing about it, without any adult approving it. They can just walk into a Planned Parenthood clinic and get an abortion with nobody saying, "Yeah, that's okay."
And really, what we know and what you know from being an undercover officer all these years is that this is really a way to hide the perpetrator of this crime.
Right.
I mean,
Of
somebody
course.
got this young girl pregnant, and it wasn't poor Johnny, who's 10 or 11 years old in most cases either. This is some adult or some older child, let's say, or
Right.
but 4 or 5 years older in some cases.
Right. They can, or even younger than that. There's some kids that wind up becoming very predatory in the way they operate, and so because they've been sexualized themselves, but then they become sexual predators to others.
Isn't it true, Tom, from your work that most sexual predators were abused themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. And
In some way, they've experienced some kind of sexual trauma
yeah. So
that's
let's get back.
manifested itself by.
So let's get back to that ruling now that you said. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it's essentially there was instruction that was being provided to the children in, was it Virginia, I think, that was contrary to what the parents of several kids believed in, that they, based on their religious belief, they said, this is not something that we want our kids being exposed to. Basically, it was homosexual lifestyles. And so the school district had decided that they weren't going to allow parents to opt their kids out of this, because this was important for kids to be exposed to these different kinds of lifestyles, because they considered it part of the normal range of human behavior. Well, the Supreme Court said, well, no, that doesn't hold water. It says this is the religious belief here of these parents supersede what the government's opinion on this. And therefore, if you parents have the right to opt their children out of any instruction that goes contrary to their religious beliefs and the way they want their children to be raised in accordance with their religion.
So
And
this was the
so
Supreme Court,
this
right?
U.S. Supreme Court, right? It was really a monumental ruling, and it's going to reverberate across in many areas. I think it even will relate to I think it can be used to attack the law in Illinois that prohibits or allows children to get an abortion without parental notification, at least. And so that hasn't been tested yet, but I think the way the ruling has been written, it appears that the parents have the right to control the upbringing of their children, especially as it relates to what's taught to them in schools. And that the schools must notify parents when there might be something that's controversial, and that the parents have a right to opt their children out.
And so this is just a common sense law, Tom,
Right. It's totally common sense. This is
because
what we
all
thought.
through.
Right.
Yeah, go
This is
ahead
what
and
we
make
thought
that
it
point.
always was. This is what we thought it always
That's
was. This
exactly
is what
right.
it was when I was a kid. My parents said, hey, no, you don't teach them that stuff.
No.
And they didn't teach that stuff in the schools. They said, "Oh, we'll defer to the parents." But now it's like it says, "No, we're the experts. We know what the kids need to know, and you parents shut up. You have no right to provide any input." And the Supreme Court has basically said, "No, you're wrong on that."
So it's always been a parent's right. I mean, this is
Yes,
part of who we are, and this is part of our whole value system in the United States, is to say parents are the primary educators of their children. The government is not the parent. The government doesn't own our children. The schools don't own our children. Nobody owns our children, Tom.
right,
They're made in the image of God, and the parents, to your point, are responsible for those children. And the government has no right to do this. I think they're just making explicit what was an understanding up until this last generation.
right.
And the last point, and I think maybe you could touch on this, is that these schools, these teachers' schools, are have been filled with this Marxist propaganda and this way of pushing this down on these teachers. They're actually being educated this way. And you can hear this. You can hear this in Chicago with this
Oh, yeah,
Chicago Teachers Union. These are our kids, and Biden said these are our kids. No, they're not your
right.
kids.
That's right. And see, most of these teachers' colleges have gone completely left wing. I mean, they are just way out there on the left end of the spectrum. And so they don't look at this as something that is that's in any way controversial. They think this is the way kids that they are the experts. They have a right to determine what their children are going to learn, and they have contempt for the parents. Now, here's one of the problems that we still have today is, and this isn't just in Illinois. This is all over the country is a problem. The Freedom of Information Act doesn't give the parents the right to see what the teacher's lesson plan is. The parents can go in and they can review the material that the children are taught, but they don't have a right to look at like the teacher's notes or what the teacher is going to say or what the teacher directs them to, what websites the teacher sends the kids to look up stuff. They don't have a right to know that. But Mahmoud versus Taylor says, oh, yes, they do.
But now
They
to
have
try
to,
to get that
yeah.
information, in a state like Illinois is still
Well,
not
in
going to be
Illinois, it's
easy.
going to be very difficult
But we need
because,
to do it. We need to
right.
start doing it, and it's the only way to get rid of these politicians that are just
We've got to
evil.
do it quickly because right now the Department of Justice will come to the parents' aid. But, if we get another Biden in there, the DOJ is not going to do anything. They're not going to enforce the rights that the parents have because in the Biden Justice Department, they did nothing to enforce the rights that the parents
Well, they
had.
did the opposite,
Nothing.
Tom. I
Right.
mean, we were talking about this a couple of years ago. The FBI was harassing parents, intentionally harassing parents that stood up
Right.
against this. And again, it gets back to that. It gets back to that. Emphasize the need to raise children away from negative influence of their parents.
Well,
Of the
it also people really need to take to heart that elections have consequences.
Yes, they do.
That the electing the wrong people can cause you to literally lose your rights that you have under the law.
If people don't start to get these value systems internally and start to live these out, they have consequences too. And we've been sitting with this proverbial frog in this pot for so long now that I just run into, and Tom, when we're doing these presentations, the hardest thing for us is to try to get people to stand up and take this in and do something. If you just go to school board meetings, nothing else, just show up, and every once in a while, if you hear something or do something, you give a 1 or 2 minute comment on those. Hey guys, don't read pornography to my children. These are 10-year-old kids. What are you doing? Why is this book? I just want to ask you here as a parent, why is this book in the library? And just start to do those kind of things. But if nothing else, just show up to school board meetings. They begin to know you. I do this. They get to know you. And I've talked to school board members afterwards, and they said, we see you out there. And we know what you stand for. And it makes us think before we just sign these kids away to this
Well,
obscenity.
you have to, time and time again, there have been people that have gone in and read out of the books that are in the school libraries and have been have been arrested and dragged away from the microphone because they don't want that language or that narrative included in the record of the meeting. They don't want to hear it. And yet these are the materials that they're giving to their children to
And
read.
when you're in a school board, getting back to Ephesians 6, I can say, and I've spoken at these school board meetings, you can look at some of these people, Tom, sitting up there, and they have no concern for those kids. They don't even
No.
react.
No,
All they
they
want
just
to do is they want to shut down. They want to shut down what you're saying, and I don't think they're even embarrassed. They just want to shut it down so nobody else knows what's going on.
it's a perfunctory kind of thing that they just sit there and listen to people that talk, and they pay no attention to them whatsoever. They don't give them any response. There's no discussion about it in public. They don't say a thing about it. They just had a board meeting here last week on a transgender girl, which is a boy, being admitted being put on the volleyball team at Conan High School. The guy is 6'4", and he's claiming to be a girl, and he's on the volleyball team, for the girls' volleyball team. This is ridiculous. It's allowed under Illinois law, but it's not allowed under federal law. It's not allowed.
And let's just continue with that. This man now is allowed to go into the locker room with these girls.
Right,
So
yes.
these are young girls who are just discovering who they are, their own sexuality. It's already been twisted and distorted by the culture and by these schools. And now a boy can come in there, and these young girls got to be thinking, I'm losing my brains here. That, I mean, it's this is how ridiculous it is. Here's a young girl that is in her own locker room. Maybe she has to, go into the shower, and this is a 6'4" man standing there, and we're forcing them to do that. And if they say something, the girls are asked to go use another bathroom. This is the irrationality of it. This gets me back to my point. This is not flesh and blood we're contending with. These are evil, evil people.
Well, the thing is, you cannot get a sensible answer out of anybody or explanation of how they justify this,
There
other
is
than
no.
to say,
No, there is none.
well, if you're a guy but you think you're a girl, then you're a girl. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And I said,
Yeah.
well, what evidence do you have of that? Well, it's just the way it is. It's like there's no evidence. There's no support behind it at all. And yet people are buying it. How do people become so delusional?
We have been sometimes, and I had this, I fought with this in my own heart, when my buddy Jimmy Patridge came back from Vietnam with no legs. He was just a couple years older than me. And he was legally blind by shrapnel, stepped on a Claymore mine. And you start to see this government. What are we doing? And why are we sending our young men overseas to fight these wars, and war after war after war after war? And you start to say, because when I was a young guy, I thought, well, the government is on our side. And this is the way it's supposed to be. The government is supposed to be promoting the same values that you and I stand for: marriage, the family, religious freedom, freedom to speak, freedom to defend ourselves. And now they start to take that away. And you say something is really wrong with our country. And so this is how I want to segment this to talk about Trump, Tom, because Trump is doing something that you and I have never seen before.
Right.
And it comes from this. I just want to read this little part, and I want to get your take on this. So this is the beauty of the Declaration of Independence. It's just the beginning. Everybody should read just the beginning of this. We know this. These truths are to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So governments have been instituted among men to promote those values, right? The same thing that I just said. Now it says that when the government becomes corrupt, and I'm just going to use some of my own words here, experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer under that corruption. Same thing we just said. Parents don't stand up, people don't wake up. And this is historical, right? This was written in 1776. While these evils are sufferable, we suffer these evils, we suffer these this corruption, but we don't want to abolish it because we're used to it. And he said that's natural in a way, not to just throw these systems off right away. But, it says, but when a train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object, so this evil coming into the world, it is our right and it's our duty to throw off such governments and provide new guards for their future security. So this is the point we're at now. And this is why I brought up, we start to see the deep state. We start to see this government becoming corrupt, being used against people. And now something happened with Trump that's never happened before. And before I throw it your way, I just was listening to somebody said with Trump derangement syndrome, and said that every single president came in all through history basically and just went along with what the system was going. Yeah, they had their own ideas. They want to implement their own changes, maybe throw out something that they didn't see. But now we have a whole system that was working against us, and Trump stood up. And I think what we're seeing now is to say, no, this government has been corrupt, and we have to throw off the old way of doing things and have a new way. That's why it's not Democrat, it's not Republican. This is a populist movement with people with values saying, nope, we've been used and abused by our own government, and it's time for a change. And I think this is what we're seeing with Trump.
Well, yeah, he's the first president in my lifetime that I've seen come in and be able to solve problems and solve them well, do a good job of it. Look at this is just one example. It is the immigration, this illegal immigration that comes in. When I first started working for the state back in the 70s, there was an issue about illegal aliens working in corporations. And, I can't remember, I guess it was Nixon that was the president at the time, and they just were so vexed by how do we deal with these corporations that are hiring people who are illegals and bringing them in. And it was like, the immigration authorities were trying to go in and they'd raid companies and catch these people, but they couldn't do anything about it. Well, we actually did an investigation of it and says, here's pretty easy. Go after, charge the employers with a crime if they hire an illegal alien. Well, they wouldn't do that. And even Reagan, when he came in the 80s, he says, oh, we can't solve this problem. We need to, more laws, better laws. What he did was he gave amnesty to 11 million illegal aliens, allowed them to stay here in the country. And so since then, it's just been a continuing thing where it finally gets up to Biden, where he's letting in, millions of people every year without anything. So, oh, we can't do anything without some law. Trump comes in on the first day, the problem is solved. I mean, he takes care of it on the first day. All they had to do was begin enforcing the laws that are already on the books and do it vigorously. And this is the problem. Nobody wants to be a vigorous enforcer of the laws, or if the law is in the way, they don't want to say, well, let's find another way to do it. And Trump is the first one that actually comes in and does that. And that's why they hate him, because he's causing so many problems with a system that's been in place and people are making money off of it. I tell you, it's not the most corrupt in the world, but we have an incredibly corrupt system here in this country. And it's not corrupt because it favors one race over another. It's corrupt because it favors the people that are after money. It favors the greedy. And we have to do something about that. And the only person that's been willing to do something about it in my lifetime is Donald Trump, it turns out to be a billionaire. Well, look at how they criticize him. He puts a patio in the Rose Garden. Look, everybody has a patio, right? So he puts a patio in there and says, so the women don't sink in the mud and the chairs don't sink and the tables don't sink. So you put a patio out there. It looks beautiful. And they say, oh, look at how he's ruined the Rose Garden. This is nuts.
Yeah. So what he has is the guts to say this. He says, look, I'm a billionaire. They can take, if I stand up against this corruption, they can take my money away. They can try to put me in prison. And they tried to do all those things. They tried to assassinate him. So nobody else that I know of has the guts to do that. Nobody else has the guts to put all their money, everything they work for, their family at risk. This is natural for a father to protect his kids. He loves his kids so much and his grandkids. but put it all at risk. His businesses, his money, his life, his reputation, everything. They came after everything, and including shooting him in the head, and
Right.
he stood up against it. So the people with Trump derangement syndrome are on the other side of this, and we know that at the end, this is about our individual freedom, our individual lives, our individual ability to stand up and speak the truth at these school board meetings, to raise our families the way we want to. And he's the first guy that I know of that actually said, you know what, they should be able to do that.
Right. Well, and he's an example of courage that we all should have.
Yes, I wish I
And
had that
and
much
so
courage.
and the no, he sets an example of it. If he can do these things, if he has the courage to do these things, we should be able to stand up
At
at
a
a
school
school
board
board
meeting.
meeting and say
Yep.
this is wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so the criticism of him is so over the top. I just saw a post that somebody made. He's got this new ballroom that he wants to build next to the White House, which looks beautiful. It looks like a great thing. It looks like it'd be a wonderful, a wonderful place rather than setting up a tent in the backyard. It's like what
Yeah.
have it looks like a beautiful thing that he's going to pay for it with his own money and other private donors comes in. Somebody was saying, well, we need to elect somebody that's going to guarantee that they're going to tear that thing down and put the whole and get rid of the patio and the rose garden and, like, what in the world
Okay,
is
well,
wrong with people?
here's number 42. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition. And so this is what let's tear it down. Let's
Right,
this is a microcosm, you just said, of exactly what they want to do with our whole country. But it's not just the country, it's the country of values and moral tradition, of ethics, of the Judeo-Christian principles that we should all be living by. When you go after, and again, if you want to bring this down, we get caught up in this a lot of noise, Tom. But if you get caught, and if you just analyze it, step back a little bit, if you get caught up in all this noise, what are they doing to kids? What are they doing to children? And when you see what they're doing to kids, they're going to board them. First of all, if they make it through the womb, they're going to take away their right, to your point, of having parents and a mom and a dad. Every kid should have the right to a mom and dad. We know they don't all, and they come
right,
up for all kinds of circumstances. But the essence of it, this is our goal, then
right.
to be
Well, it should
educated
be our goal,
in
but
the
it isn't
truth.
our goal.
It isn't our
It
goal.
should be our goal to give every child a mother and a father, not a dad and a mom, but a mother and a father. That should be our goal.
And to instill moral, ethical values in them, so when they go out into the world, they're bringing this good into the world and this truth into the world. These poor kids that are suffering from these mental illnesses, they're suffering because something's wrong with their heart. Well, they know this cognitive dissonance that psychiatry talks about, where what you're seeing in the world doesn't line up with what your heart is telling you. And this is what they're feeling. But then they're told that the world's right and their heart is wrong, and you're going to suffer from this.
Right, and that's I think one of the things that Trump brings to it is a clear understanding of a clear vision of what we want for America and for the American people. And one of the things he looks at is he wants them to have life, which is why he's gone after all these wars all over the world. One of the first things he wants to stop the killing because you can't have a good life if you're dead.
No.
Stop the killing and stop America from being drawn into that killing and having to send our own troops to these places where they're getting killed far away.
And for people that don't dive into this stuff as much or as often as we do, this industrial warfare, right? This military industrial complex is huge, and all
Yes.
these wars that we're talking about are started with big money behind them. People make, to your point, a lot of money on this thing. They don't want these wars to stop, and they are after Trump. And so this is
Yes.
another thing to remember about him, and that's a great point, Tom. That when every bomb that is exploded someplace, kids are dying, families are dying. You're devastating their way of living. The human dignity is stripped from them, and we forget about this. This is we've become this techno war now, where we can send drones in to kill all these people, and we feel like there's nothing there. These are people. These are
Right.
people being killed and massacred, and we've lost our human heart if we don't see this. And that's a great point that Trump comes in and he wants to stop wars, and they want to kill him for that, Tom. I mean,
Right.
this is how evil we've become. To your point, we start wars all over the world, don't
Well, we do, and we have troops in over 100 countries. We have U.S. troops in over 100 countries.
we? Yeah. And if we were exporting all good things, maybe that would justify trying to do some of that, but we're not. We're taking down governments just because we don't like something that they said. But our government is corrupt. So what are we really doing? Look at
Right.
look
Well,
at with this Ukraine Russia thing. You know, we had taken away, and we said in negotiations decades ago that we would not bring Ukraine into NATO. We would not put basically missiles at the Russian border, et cetera. But we've done all that. We've provoked this war, and
well, and that's the Biden administration did just exactly that. They're the ones that provoked the war and they sent Kamala over there to prevent it from happening, which is
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that was a surefire way to get it started.
Well, at least she had success when they sent her down to the border. At least, right,
Yeah,
Tom?
right,
She
yeah, she
stopped
had
that
did a
at
lot of
least.
good a lot of she well, no, it was she sent her down they sent her down to Central America to find the root causes of it, you know?
Unbelievable. Hey, Thomas, it's been good to be with you. We've run out of
Yeah.
time, but thank you so
Alright.
much. And you know, keep your eyes open, people. Focus on the kids. Focus on your own hearts. Get your heart right. And then when you get a chance to stand up at a school board meeting, run for a local office. If you're there, even if you don't know what you're doing, you're bringing the goodness of your own heart, of your own value system, where somebody could have got that spot and brought evil in. So even if you don't know what you're doing, just because you're doing good and you're a good person, you're going to be better than somebody that's going to twist and distort this and use their office for their own selfishness. Amen, brother.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye bye.